Yeah, you guys can go. Perfect.
Okay, well, welcome. I think we have like six or so people, which is cool. This is the Project Access or Access Academy webinar on studying history at university in the UK and in the US. My name is Harrison, and we have Singer and Yuha, studying history across the world, and we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like, what the sort of week is, future prospects, and so on, the application process. And that should take, I guess, about half an hour or so, and then we can just have some questions. Ask any questions you like in the chat. We'll get to it at the end, and then yeah, go from there. So start quickly with an intro to PA, then we'll look at history in the US or in the UK, and that's the history is what studying history is like in the UK, not history of the UK. Same thing for the US, the application process of both, and then a bit on careers, as I said. So what's Project Access? Project Access, as you probably know, is a international non-profit charity run by students from across the world, working to pair underprivileged, talented mentees, or we call mentees, high school students from anywhere in the globe, with a mentor at their dream university in the UK or the US. We established about 4 years ago in London by a bunch of Danish students, but we've grown to around about 200 team members, and I think we're helping students from around 30 countries. So yeah, that's a little bit about us, always growing. And I think it's always worth touching on, especially as we go through the application process section, about how we can help you as you go through that journey. So a little intro into us. This is me. Wow, that's a nice picture. I am a history and computer science double major at Yale University. I'm going into my third of 4 years there, but I'm from the UK, and yeah, just I never actually really knew what I was going to study, and I still am trying to study multiple things, and I get into, I guess, a bit more my interest in history in a bit, but yeah. I studied history for our school and so on, and I guess in terms of what I'm studying now, it's more of a global track, but my interest is actually in US history. So yeah, that's a quick one there, and I'll hand over.
Well, hi, I'm Yuha. I'm a recent Cambridge graduate, and well, I also did history. Did history at Cambridge, just graduated in last month, and I'm originally from Finland. And because I get a chance to talk to history nerds, I'll just talk a bit about my interests within history. So I'm primarily interested in Russian and Soviet history, and I also like to read a lot of history, sort of just beyond my degree as well. History is something that I've always found very interesting, and the reason why I decided to study history at university was that I really thought that it would be just kind of the most clever or kind of wise and prudent choice overall to study something that I liked and kind of pivot from there to wherever that would take me. So just kind of really wanted to go with my interests first, right?
Cool. And congrats on just graduating. I guess it's not an easy place to graduate.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Sina. I'm about to enter my third year of studying history at UCL, so I'm also studying in the UK. Originally, I'm from Denmark, so we're two Nordics in here now. And my interest in history actually span very wide. I like to study all kinds of history that I've not studied yet. So I don't actually have like a certain specialism, but within areas of history, I'm very interested in intellectual history and global history. And as of more recently with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, I've grown a lot more into the history of emotions and public history, which I might do for my dissertation. And then outside of studying, I'm interested in all kinds of sports. I love cooking and in general just reading. I'm very much into classics at least. And we've put something down here as well for work experience, and it's hard getting to things at the moment, I'll admit, because of the whole corona crisis and the pandemic. But there's still opportunities available. And this summer and last summer, I've done some different project work and worked a bit with communications. And now I'm doing some marketing within Project Access for the Danish team.
Awesome.
And I'm not sure if I'm the next one to present, or you can just grab on.
Yeah, let me switch the slides and we'll see. Yeah, so history.
That is me. So I chose to study history in the UK because, first of all, at least at the time, or still after Brexit, it's going to be cheaper than studying at a top university in America. It's closer to home, and I'd never lived here. I did live 1 year in America at one point, so I was trying something new. For the academic tradition, which I'm going to talk about later, I also think it's a seriously great place to study history. And just comparable, at least to how history is perceived in Denmark, I think that it's a great place to at least find your first job after you've studied history. Because in the UK, I think most different companies are more open towards people who study history. A lot of MPs have studied PPE, law, or history. Whereas in Denmark, I'd kind of be put down, and like people would think that being a historian is a librarian's or a teacher's job, but not in the UK. I feel as if there's a lot more doors open to me. Also when it comes to masters. So I feel like I can study anything from go into specific fields of law. I can do international development, management, all kinds of business studies, sociology, politics, basically you name it, there's going to be something that where you can pitch history easily towards either an employer or for a master's degree, which I think is very good at least. And I know that for a fact, many people at UCL who graduated this year or the past year have worked within all kinds of different sectors. It's everything from teaching to publishing, charities, of course, academics, campaigning, research, law, even finance or consulting. So it really depends on what you do for work experience, of course, but there's many ways in which you can shape your course. And then specifically for UCL, but also a lot of other London universities, I'd probably say King's, LSE, Queen Mary as well, maybe. You can expect a lot of freedom of choice in the way that you structure your degree. So I get 25% of my modules every year that I can pick from another department than my own. So if I wanted to do 15 credits of studying public law or criminal law, I could do that. Or I could do 15 credits of a language, 15 credits of economics if I wanted to every year. And then kind of structure that and put it all together into one course. And that's giving you a lot of different skills that I think are going to look very good on your CV compared to maybe some more traditional universities. But Juha can always tell you about that later if you have any questions about that in the QA. And then if you could skip a slide, please, Harrison. Yes, and then as for the academic tradition in the UK, I feel that it's very rich. We have everyone from Edward Gibbon, who wrote the first book on Great Roman history, to a more modern person as Quentin Skinner, who really have created their own theories that we still discuss within history today. And specifically for UCL as well, I feel that our campus is very international. So I've had professors from China, from Germany, from Italy, from the UK as well. Of course, that just gives you another perspective in the way that you discuss things in seminars. And the same thing goes for a student body. Because we're such a small but international group, you can be sure that the discussion is never going to be just a one-way situation. Everyone's going to be coming from different environments, having experienced different things, and having grown up in different countries and cultures where you perceive things such as globalism, colonialism, or the Second World War quite differently. So you're always learning in that way, even if you think you know quite a lot of things about global history and the way that the history is perceived around the world. You don't really until you're in that international environment. Then, of course, I think the professors are amazing. Even if you're not at Oxbridge, a university such as mine will give you hours every week if you want to come by someone's office to discuss an essay or just in general talk about your historical interests. If you want to network academically, so to speak, you can do that. And you're guaranteed to get a lot of rigorous and personal feedback on every single one of your essays. And I really think that that's something that you should utilize as much as you can, because you really do get a lot back from that. And I'm sure that if I'd chosen to study at home, none of this would have been the same. I would have been in lectures instead of seminars, and I probably even wouldn't have gotten great feedback on my essays. So all of these things are very personalized and make you a better student, I would say. Yeah, that's it for me, for now at least. Oh yes, a personal day in the life of a history student. So as I'm in London, things are very busy. You're in the city, in the middle of the city, and you're walking around campus, but there's lots of different student cafes all around. Usually you'll meet up with a friend in the morning before your first lecture or your seminar, and you'll get a coffee. And that's what I did this last year. I had a French module instead of just a normal history one, because I was trying to support my French language for a going abroad experience that I was supposed to have before Corona. That's not a thing anymore. Yes, and then I'd go study maybe at the library for a couple of hours, and then straight back on for a quick lunch, and then on for doing some essay reading for another module. Taking out some new books, doing some readings, figuring out what question I would want to choose. Then maybe I'd meet up with a professor to discuss that question, and then head on to a seminar. That could be on, last year, it could be on political war writing and the Spanish Civil War and journalism, things that are quite modern. And then finally, I'd go on to do some more research for this one project that we do in our second year. Kind of like a small dissertation. You pick your own question and your own sources, and then the output of that is pretty much something that you've done completely on your own. So that can go both a good and a bad way, but for most people it's very good and interesting, and it gives you an experience of real research. And then finally, because uni can be hard and it's long days, you can just go out for a pint with friends and enjoy that. You're off for at least another few hours. Yeah.
Great. Okay, I guess this is me. So studying history in the US, I think I should contextualize this a bit about studying in the US as well. So studying in the US is, at least for most universities, is what's called a liberal arts degree. So what that means basically is you study a lot of things and major and focus on one of them. But that focus is not as overwhelming as it is in the UK. So to give some better explanation, to graduate from Yale, you need to get 36 credits. By and large, like one class is 1 credit. And that's over the course of 4 years. And you also need, but to major in history, you just need to have 12 credits in history. So only a third of the classes you necessarily need to take, you take in history, and the rest of the things you can really study what interests you, stuff that complements history, stuff that completely opposes it. And I mean, I think that's like, to me, I think that's a cool sort of like component, because you know, especially for something like history, because everyone who studies history, I think by and large wants to attain some sort of understanding of the present, and then usually might want to apply that understanding in the present in some sort of way. And then I think complementing the study of history with you know, whatever, like often people study with economics or politics or I don't know, is quite a powerful thing. So yeah, that's like a little bit of background. You don't actually have to like apply to the US. I guess I'll get into this. Like, you don't have to apply to the US just for history. It's like you just go to the university. But when you do start doing history, the classes are divided into, and I'm sure this is the same really as most things in the UK, divided into seminars, which are like small classes with a professor and about 8 to 12 sort of students, really discussing quite in depth for like 2.5 hours or so every week or twice a week, one particular subject. So last semester I did a seminar on like the Middle East before oil, which is really fun. And then lectures, which is, you know, everyone knows what a lecture is. At Yale, at least, we have like global tracks and specialist tracks. So a global track is I think perhaps something that you find like it's quite common. Like, it's just for people who are interested in like a broad spectrum of history and global history. Honestly, like really useful. It's quite a popular, like it's quite in fashion to study the sort of like global influences on like a particular micro area of history, or you do a specialist track and you focus mostly on the US, mostly on Europe, mostly on Japan, whatever. Studying abroad is again, you know, this is available in the UK, but I think it's like potentially, I would argue, like even more powerful in the US. US universities really encourage it, and also if you get financial aid, you can study abroad sometimes for free all over the world. And I mean, it can be very useful because fundamentally, like the US has like less history than that's probably not the way to put it. Less history than the UK or whatever, or the US or France and so on. So you can go study all over the place in the summer, or for a whole year, or for a semester, and get it towards a degree. So a lot of people do that, and they also do that for other subjects as well, and complement their history. So they might go and study French, and then it helps their sort of like study of French history. Majoring, so yeah, as I said, like you can major in history, you can double major in history, but pretty much like the important thing to stress is that you don't have to take all history courses in the US. So if you're interested in history, but you're also interested in whatever else, or you going back to like job opportunities, you also want to do, you know, like, I don't know, for instance, I do computer science because my background, I also work for this startup, and I work for another startup, and I'm really interested in that side of things as well. So there's quite a nice flexibility there. I believe I also have why study history in the US. Yeah. So I think this doesn't necessarily differentiate the US so much from the UK. Like, frankly, like there's amazing professors in the UK as well. I think especially for US history and perhaps some other global histories, especially at some universities in the US, like there really are like world leading professors, certainly, and you definitely have access to them right from the start. Like you know, my friend was doing a pretty amazing or my roommate was doing this pretty amazing seminar last semester on called like The Art of Biography, and it was with John Lewis Gaddis, who you may have heard of, and that's like a pretty standard thing, and whatever. And I did a class on the Civil War, actually, the American Civil War, last semester with a guy called David Blight, who just won the Pulitzer Prize. So, you know, at least these top universities, like anywhere else, like the professors are pretty awesome. As I said, you can really complement your other interests in the US rather than having to focus solely on history. The resources and the archives, again, like, I mean, I think you struggle probably to compete with the sort of archives of Cambridge. But certainly the US universities have such huge endowments and huge support from their, especially historically, from their alumni, that they really have access to some amazing resources that you can you know, literally go in and touch, feel, whatever, as a history graduate. And And then job opportunities. I think.
Sorry, just to interrupt, as you made a reference to Cambridge, but yeah, of course, Cambridge has benefited from having been around for a pretty long time. But I can confirm, as someone who has kind of looked around, what kind of universities have what kind of sources. Like even if some American colleges are a bit newer, that they've used their financial resources to purchase very, very interesting archives or very, very interesting, let's say, correspondences and diaries and things like that. So they have, as you said, they have a lot of stuff that is significantly older than, let's say, Yale, which was founded when it was like 1750s, 1760s, or 18th century. So yeah, apologies for just wanted to.
No, totally. I mean, I think I know other people like who've studied history at Cambridge as well, and I mean, to be frank, like, I think if you really want to study history and that's all you care about and you want to be a history professor, I would probably tell you to go and study history in the UK and focus all of your time on history, especially if you want to study European history or British history. But if you want to really complement it with other things and then going back to job interests as well, like I think it's clear. I mean, job opportunities are not good anywhere in the world right now, but frankly, like most of the top sort of like hubs for industries, are in the US in terms of like job opportunities for history students. Very, very common for history students to go into law school in the US, into politics, into finance sometimes. I think history is actually the most popular major at Yale. It's very flexible, as I said. So, good job opportunities. I think the last thing here is, this is what one of my sort of standard week looked like for me at Yale. I should have put, I run. Oh, this is set in GMT time. So I run track at Yale as well, which is a nice thing that's differentiates the US, like the fact that you can do those other extracurriculars. So I did that every afternoon. Day would sort of start on a Monday. I was doing a class on the origins of US global power, like going back to the sort of resources they have at Yale. Like there was like a project around like primary sources and so on. And I went into one of our archives and was reading the correspondence, like the actual, like holding the letters of one of the first like Americans to travel out to California in like 1830s. And that was pretty cool. That should say their introduction. So I was also taking a class on the introduction to psychology. As I said, like complement, you have to study all this variety of things, have track, and then I go, I was doing a class on ethics and international affairs, then a class on the Civil War, lunch, track again, and then repeating that. And then you can see at the bottom there a sort of two-hour seminar on the Middle East before oil every week as well. And that again involved like more of a deep dive final essay. And I honestly really enjoyed the seminar, perhaps more than the lecture, and I got a lot out of it. And that's a pretty standard week. And that is the library there at Yale. It's like 14 floors or something. Cool. So this is the application process in the UK. I think I'm handing over now.
Yeah. This is my slide. So so I will go into more detail in the next slide, but I'll just kind of go through very quickly the basic elements of the application process in the UK. So most universities require just the basic UCAS app, or like whatever UCAS features, which is the personal statement, your teacher's references, and your grades. Remind me, please, if I missed anything, because it was quite a while ago when I applied. I think that's all. And if you're applying for Oxbridge, you will need these three elements, but also you will need to take a subject-specific test. And when these slides will be shared with you guys, you will be able to click the links, and they will take you to either the Oxford or the Cambridge sort of pre-interview assessments, and you can study them in more detail. So it's called HAA, History Application Assessment at Cambridge, and HAT, History Admissions Test at Oxford. And so these tests will be like kind of the first stage of your application sort of evaluation after you have sent in your UCAS. So if you pass those tests, and the universities will, or one of these universities will decide to invite you to an interview, you will then, of course, go to that interview, but also in most cases send 1 or 2 essays to the universities that you're applying for. And these essays will be used in part to kind of structure the interview around your interests. One of the best advice that I've ever received when it comes to sending these kind of school essays for the interview process is that you shouldn't really prioritize those essays which got the best marks. It's possible to get good marks in an essay that you didn't really care that much about. It's best to send in essays that you feel very passionate about, that you feel that you could talk about the subject of those essays for 30 minutes, an hour. So even if you have an essay that perhaps from the point of view of your teachers was not the best essay, but you feel that that is something that you will not have trouble talking about with an interviewer, please prioritize those essays. I think that's really great advice. And yeah, the interview. But there's going to be more on that in the next slide on how to prepare for those. This is a very kind of a big wall of text, and I will try to kind of go through these points very briefly. I primarily wrote this in order for you to kind of read this at your own leisure after this presentation. But one of the key things, the most essential thing that you can do to prepare for your application is to read. History is a very reading-heavy subject, and you'll get to do a lot of reading during your degree. And kind of reading out of your own volition, reading something that you're interested in, is a way to show to your interviewers that you can be proactive in your reading, and that you will be able to that you have intrinsic interest in the course. And by reading, I'm kind of also referring to going beyond your school curriculum, because this is also something that university professors love. That when you're actually doing a subject at university, usually those people who go beyond their reading lists in one way or another get the best marks. Not that you would have to sort of read through the entire reading list, which can be, let's say, 30, 40 items, and then go beyond it by adding to that. What is sort of desirable is that you read the most essential things on the reading list and then somehow branch out, because the key thing to remember is that all curricula are kind of artificially curated things, and by showing that you're able to go beyond that, you're aware that not all knowledge that is worth knowing is sort of within those curricula. And when reading, keep in mind that you have to read critically. So how do authors justify their arguments? Are their arguments convincing? What evidence is used? And a good thing to do is to keep a log on these things. So if you run across something very interesting, jot it down, and then you can perhaps use it in your personal statement. So just to summarize, reading by yourself will show to the person reading your personal statement that you are willing to read history without someone holding a gun to your temple, so that you actually want to do it. So that's why it's so important. And then actually, when I was talking about going beyond curricula, it's also not a bad thing to go beyond subject boundaries as well. Sort of being open-minded when it comes to learning from other subjects like mathematics, philosophy, foreign languages, politics, economics. You show that you're aware that history as an academic discipline is kind of arbitrary in a sense as well, and that it is just one of the ways that using which you can look at the world, and that these things that have traditionally been included in other subjects are also very, very useful when it comes to understanding the past. And so then coming to these two things that I mentioned in the previous slide, for tests, a good way to practice is just read and then try to understand what you've read, and just repeating that over and over again. And for interviewing, this can actually be surprisingly difficult. Try to express what you think about a certain difficult thing, sort of verbally to a friend or a family member. It is very much easier to just write about it or just kind of think about it in your head. But verbalizing complex things, that is really something that they'll be looking for at the interview. So that's a good way to practice. But I guess the easiest way for you to kind of look at the slide is just to read this afterwards. There's a lot of things here.
Great.
And yeah, I think careers, that's the next kind of thing that we'll address.
I can touch real quick on the application process in the US.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Just because there's no slide, because there's no explicit application process for history. You can apply and say you'd like to study history, but it's not this sort of rigorous process as you find in the US or in the UK for like demonstrating this massive interest in history. I think like going back to the application process in the US, you're really trying to demonstrate that you're going to bring something to the community at that university. And if that is a passion for history, awesome. If it's a passion for like music and filmmaking, but you're also, really talented at all these other things, that's again fine. So like, I think like some of the principles I was just talking about, just like really demonstrating this intrinsic interest in something, still apply when you're applying to the US. In terms of like the basic application process, like we have several other webinars on that and lots of information, and we can also support you through that process by pairing you with a mentor, and like pairing you with a mentor that studies history, so that you can be supported and like tailor your application for that passion. But yeah, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but it's certainly a less intense process in terms of the historical aspect or the subject specific aspect than the UK is. Whether it's less intense, like generally, I'm not sure, but it's yeah, a bit more personal and generic than the UK, which is more specific and academic. But then we talk a little bit about is there a life after history?
Yeah, I mean, yes, there is a life after history. But one of the key things that I learned in university is that, I don't know, maybe it's kind of a more of a Cambridge thing, or I kind of suspect that it's more of a universal university thing. But there's not a lot of degrees in which you learn a lot of super practicable things, or like university is not really a practical experience for most degrees, in a sense that what you really learn is not the substance that you learn. That is not the most important, but really the skills that you pick up. And surprisingly, this, even as far as I understand, it's kind of the case for very kind of more pre-professional degrees like computer science. Friends who have done computer science, and they've told me that mainly like the practical skills that they've learned is through basically YouTube and independent projects. But at university, they've usually done like something like a very kind of abstract mathematical algorithm stuff that is not really going to be directly applicable to anything. And it's kind of the same thing for most subjects. I guess Harrison can confirm. Maybe this is more of a Cambridge thing.
Oh no, that's certainly. I can certainly confirm that. I think you're making a very valid point. Certainly.
Yeah, yeah, and kind of like if I were able to go back in time a few years and just tell myself how the university works, I would just tell that I was wrong to think that you study something and that path kind of inexorably leads to some very clear predefined thing. So as with any degree, but especially with history, because history is kind of a bit more vague, a bit more kind of not concerned with the here and now really that much. You kind of need to put an effort to lead your degree to a certain destination. So doing history, you learn a lot of very, very interesting and attractive transferable skills, such as analytical reading and writing, critical thinking, and clear and persuasive communication. I mean, these things, like, they sound a bit wishy-washy, but they are quite important in the job market. They are. And in terms of, the actual practical skills, the best thing to do is to engage in interesting extracurriculars. So usually what many of my historian friends did was that they, alongside their studies, they went to, let's say, finance clubs or consulting clubs or something related to policy or NGOs. And through that, they gained an insight into the industry that they wanted to work in. So when it comes to these transferable skills, it's usually these extracurriculars that help you to understand how you actually transfer them from the academic context to the quote unquote real world. So through them, you learn things like project management, teamwork, leadership, problem solving. So really, if you're kind of very, very smart with the way how you spend your time at university, that you really engage with your subject, i.e. history in this case, but then you're also open to other opportunities beyond the kind of just the academic kind of core of your time at university. That is how you maximize your ability to kind of pivot towards the career that you would like.
If I
and
can
then I
add
listed
something to that real quick,
please.
if I can add something to that real quick, it would also be, even if you're not studying history, but basically anything at university, as far as I know, in the UK, you should be part of some society or do some part of voluntary work, unless you're studying something like medicine, where you're gonna follow a certain path into a certain job. You should do something while you're a student that gives you certain skills or makes you appear a certain way on a CV. You don't go straight out of university after studying history or PPE or law if you don't have anything specific that's really going to support you in what you did in your academic life. It's not enough to simply say, I studied and was a good student. You need something else to support it usually. So definitely what Juha says is very true.
For sure.
Yeah, and as I said, really sort of navigating that interface between academic life and the life outside of the bubble, doing things like, well, for us it's project access or something else. That is kind of the interface through which we can kind of connect the more abstract things that we learn at university with the rest of the world. But I just also wanted to say that history has some sort of clear intrinsic advantages as well. So for example, if you want to go into business, finance or consulting, a history degree will actually help to help set you apart. There's been a lot of talk in the business community that uniformity of degrees produces uniformity of thinking, and some of these companies have been kind of trying to recruit from the social sciences and the humanities to compensate for that. So, and after having, let's say, learned some team working skills through Project Access, I can say that the fact that people do different degrees actually is a good point in forming a good and functioning team. And also, history involves a lot of thinking that is not cognitively repetitive. So abstract thinking, creative thinking, that is going to be harder to automate in the future. And the most important thing, there's been a lot of talk about lifelong learning and at workplaces that, every 3 years, things will change so much that you basically need to reinvent yourself. History just kind of gives you a good foundation of curiosity and also the ability to kind of to reinvent yourself a little bit in order to be well equipped for lifelong learning. And then I listed a few sectors to consider: finance, consulting, law, especially in the UK. History is a very big pre-law subject. Civil service, advertising, marketing, journalism, academia. So yeah, actually, you can do quite a bit with a history degree. Yeah. Did anyone have anything to add? Because we have a question in the chat.
Yeah, I think I hope there's life after history. I think that I would probably add like a couple of things, like, well, I'll not even add, like, I think the points here about the advantage of studying history are really quite do definitely resonate with me. Like, I think there's a misconception potentially that you just read a ton in history and then just sort of like synthesize it and write it down, or you read a bunch of different viewpoints and then just write them all down. But like, what I really enjoy doing history is when I have to properly think about, like, for example, like, I was doing this Civil War class last semester, and we had to write an essay. It's an essay on the cause of the Civil War, and trying to actually understand why did a whole country go to war over slaves? Why did millions of white men in the North go and sacrifice themselves, or go to fight for slaves? I thought they were supposed to be racist. Like, trying to conceptualize that and like do that sort of abstract thinking is certainly really useful in at least in startups. Like, all I've worked in is in startups, so I can tell you that. And then the other thing, I think, in terms of lifelong learning and like learning skills, and I think like having a passion actually just for reading and for like learning stuff, which you really, I think, have to do history, and you cultivate doing history, is super valuable just in general, to just learn loads of other stuff and like where your interests go, and I really enjoy learning. So yeah, I mean, I would say there's life after history for sure. Certainly in the US, as I said, like, history is like one of the most popular majors there. So yeah.
I'd also say for particular skills that I've been given from studying history, this might be more of a thing at certain universities than others, but public history is really like a big go-getter these days for content creating. So it's like forcing history out of academia, out of the academic box, where you kind of just like stick to your essays and critical thinking. And that's like what we get nerdy about, and we do love that. But then taking some of that as well, and then for maybe once or twice a year, making a public history output, we call it. So like, here's an idea for like how I would pitch it in a tourist podcast. And then like, I was in a group of other students, we'd walk to Trafalgar Square in London and do like a podcast about Trafalgar Square and the history of the public space and monuments. Or we would do like different articles and send them out. It's like teaching you how you could become a producer of any sort of kind, not necessarily just like the classic museum exhibition, but how would you take any sort of creative skill and navigate your knowledge towards somewhere where it's more approachable. by any part of the public, really. So I think that's been really good. But I don't know, should we move on to the questions part?
Sure.
Because we have a few.
I have one more thing to add. Just want to underline that university, at least for me, university can be quite hard. It's a lot of work and it takes a lot of commitment. So just studying something that you like will make your university experience so much better, and it will just make it so much easier for you to succeed at university, both academically, but also in terms of having more energy and time for extracurricular activities, meeting new people, networking, etc. So it's just kind of studying something that you love is just going to make those 3-4 years so much nicer.
Yeah, I was going to apply for law in the beginning as well, but I changed my mind because I figured that law was going to be too heavy for me for 3 years or even more to get through university. But studying history now, I've seen that I've definitely picked the right thing. Being passionate at something, like you have says, really helps you pull through.
All right, great. I think there's no open questions in the Q&A, but a couple on the chat. So it's slightly easier we can answer on both, I don't care, but it's slightly easier to manage on the Q&A tab. But anyway, there's a question on talking a bit about extracurriculars in the university. And I think this is probably similar across the UK and the US. Like, I don't have so much experience, obviously. Like, I know actually plenty of people who study in the UK. Honestly, I mean, like, I will make a broad and not very informed general statement that extracurriculars, at least especially at Cambridge and Oxford, like when you apply, it's not so much encouraged. It's like very much about what you're studying. That's, to be fair, I also know people at Cambridge, they go to Cambridge and they spend all their time rowing and stuff. But like, anyway, in the US, extracurriculars are a massive part of the application process, and that importance follows through to your experience in the university. So when you apply, everyone who applies to these schools, they have like their thing, as it were, that differentiates them, because everyone has a good score in their SATs and so on. And that extracurricular is probably what they do. They'll also likely join a club, or I certainly would encourage joining a club in the sort of in the realm or the industry or the career that you're interested in. So like consulting clubs, whatever, like finance clubs like they have in the UK. And yeah, I would say people do about 1 to 2 extracurriculars in the US, and they balance their time. Right? I don't know if that helps.
I think it might be different from what university you're studying at when it comes to the UK. Because like I know that at Oxford, for example, you're not allowed to work. That's not extracurriculars, of course. But if you wanted to have a part-time job outside of your studies, you're not allowed to during term time. So extracurriculars would really be something that you'd need to really go in for. I think at my university, people are probably a part of or active in 1 to 3 societies a year. Societies could also be a club, a sports club. And that's a mix of like professional minded societies. Some are like break into finance focused, others will be consulting, others could be like a young labor society, that kind of thing. But it could also be something very chill, like Beyonce Appreciation Society, that kind of thing. So there's a mix of everything for everybody.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add. Yeah, so in the application process, at least for Cambridge, extracurriculars are not really that emphasized, but once you actually get into the university, you get to do a lot of very interesting things. So there's a society for basically almost anything you can think of, sports, all the pre-professional societies, and then also just these very goofy, weird things like tiddlywinks. I don't even know what that is, and Quidditch, Muggle Quidditch. So, and also an important thing to keep in mind is that at many universities you'll also get quite a bit of support if you wanted to start your own society. So universities have these schemes within which they support either financially or by, let's say, providing you with a space, your initiative if you wanted to start a new society. So and also university is just a very good time to take this type of initiative because you'll be surrounded by a lot of very, very interesting people, and it will be just super easy to find people with common interests. You'll at least find 10 to 20 people to play Quidditch with. So just really sort of grab this opportunity and go. And also just wanted to remind that, while I said that extracurriculars help to sort of guide you towards some sort of a career, some sort of an interest beyond academics, also in that domain, the best thing to do is just to do something that you're passionate about. Employers will be, more kind of happy to see you do something that you're really passionate about and that you're really good at, even if it's Quidditch. But you can show leadership and all types of skills playing Quidditch. I actually don't play Quidditch. I just use that as a silly example. So yeah.
Well, quick.
Do what you love. Yeah, sorry.
We should maybe talk about volunteering as well. So not just societies, but you can also volunteer. I think there's some at every kind of university, both in the UK and the US. I know there's a lot of opportunities available in London. Every single university student union have their own webpage where they'll put up different volunteering opportunities. If you're interested in working in museums or in different kind of consulting projects, you can always volunteer. And there's a lot, especially during these times with the pandemic, because a lot of people do need help. So there's always something available in that point in time as well, where you can say, oh, I actually did work with an NGO or this person for a project because you did it as a volunteer while you were a student.
Yeah, that is a very, very good point, because of course you'll always have the city around it. And even if, let's say, Cambridge is just the university plus 2 shops, there's still a lot of very interesting non-university related things going on. So, for example, I volunteered at the local homeless shelter, which is not affiliated with the university in any way.
All right, cool. I think there's a couple of questions here. So there's one question about diversity in the campus and what was the biggest challenge living in another place different than I was used to and what we were used to. So I think this obviously applies to actually all. I can take this quickly. Let me just mute this person. Diversity in the campus. I mean, I can only speak from my experience in the US. I work with Project Access because I think that the universities do a poor job at getting a diverse international community across the board in the UK and the US, but my experience in the US. Domestically, the diversity is pretty good in the campus, like in terms of a diverse group of people, a diverse community, diverse set of skills. You meet the best part of going to university, I think, is the community of people that you meet and spend every evening with and learn from and so on. Yeah, and then I think in terms of the biggest challenge, I guess one challenge I had was, like, especially when we talk about careers, I found it like there was a lack of, like, I didn't really know what consulting was, all these things meant. And so, like, if you have that sort of like that knowledge gap when you're going in, you can miss out on joining those clubs when you need to and so on. And I guess I missed out on that in the first year. And I mean, there's a lot you can do, especially I guess in the US, it's a little bit overwhelming, and certainly it's quite I guess one difference in the US is, like, it was a different environment whereby you're tested all the time, and right from the start everything counts to your degree, rather than potentially like your exams towards the end of the year being the main thing that counts to your final grade, and that was something I had to adapt to, I think, quite a lot, especially over the first semester.
My university experience for diversity has been good. I mean, most London universities, of course, are very diverse. But I will say it's very centralized to some reason, wherein students will come from. So there's a lot from China or Malaysia, but there's not going to be as many from Korea. There's a lot from certain European countries, but not as much like France, Italy, but you'll not find as many from Eastern Europe. And finally, I do not think we have a whole lot of African students, a few Northern African, but or Middle Eastern, we don't even have, too many. So there's still some lack of diversity. It's very centralized where people are coming from, but it's still an international environment nevertheless. I didn't find moving to London particularly difficult. I feel like I was already quite independent when I came to live here. As for the actual academic system here, I fell easily into it, but I think that's because I'm from a Scandinavian background where we're encouraged independent thinking throughout high school, and we don't have too many multiple choice tests. And I feel like when I went into my seminars to discuss arguments or different essay writings, and so that I have some experience with me already that I could bring into it. But that might be different depending on which country you're coming from, really.
Yeah, about diversity. At least when it comes to history, Cambridge, the Cambridge historian student body is very white and very British. So yeah, it's not, at least in terms of my course, it's not super diverse. That's just the way it is. I think one of the reasons might be that, if you are British and white and more middle or upper middle class, you feel more secure in studying history. The issue is that many of these humanities degrees have become or have traditionally been and have stayed very quote unquote gentrified. So history is a bit of a kind of a posh boy degree, at least at Cambridge. So in a sense that people know that they will be fine even if they study something that doesn't, or a subject that doesn't particularly lead to any clearly predefined thing. And the issue has been that many more kind of working class students, they tend to pivot themselves to more sciencey, more obviously applicable subjects, because they might feel that might make their future a bit more secure. So yeah, and I think that's really a proper problem, because as well, Signia referred to this, historians actually have a relatively big influence on the way we see and perceive the world through the various manifestations of public history. You have your historian coming in for an interview on TV or making a documentary. So it can be a bit problematic that if the body of individuals who engage in these activities is if that's like a homogenous body of people. I think there was another question baked into here. Yeah, moving. I mean, I found the transition to be quite hard, to be honest. It was hard academically. I was kind of crushed for the first year, to be honest. And if you're not British, be prepared for very bad food. So one of the best ways to prepare is to learn to cook before you come, because the food is absolutely horrendous. Apologies, Harrison, but that is just the case. I mean, before coming here, like, I thought that the stereotype about British food being bad was like kind of like an overblown joke, but wow, it is bad.
I think I mean, to be honest, I have I know a bunch of people that's Cambridge and like quite close friends, and like the food in Cambridge, like in terms of the restaurants, pretty good. So not to touch getting too much into that, but like certainly I'm I mean, this is what we're working to improve, but like certainly when you go to Cambridge, especially coming from the US, where like, to be fair, I would argue the diversity, at least like in terms of different people from a variety of backgrounds and races and so on, is probably better. Certainly it's better than Cambridge. Like you go to Cambridge and it can be quite bad, but that's what we're trying to improve. There's a question here. Does the historical point of view change depending on which university you're in? The perspective of the facts can change. I understand by studying history of a fact, I'm supposed to see the point of view of the author or this fact of action. It's actually a really interesting question, sort of getting to the heart of like, I think there's a couple of things loaded in here, which is, I guess we didn't even touch on much, but when you're applying to universities, don't allow yourself to be constrained by, I guess, your like political point of view or whatever, but it is worth investigating the professors at the university and understanding, you know, what they've written on, whether they're, you know, quite coming from an orthodox perspective, especially on stuff you're interested in, or they're on the other side of it, right? And your perception of those facts will certainly be heavily determined by that, like especially when you begin to do some of the more seminar-based classes and you're spending a lot of time discussing with that professor what they think about a given point, a given moment in time. And so I mean, I guess yes, but I would also say like history departments, I think at least the history department does a decent job at being like quite diverse and having a variety of viewpoints, so at least diverse in its perspectives, so you can expose yourself, especially if you go down that more specialist track, to multiple ideas, and the readings as well will force you to be exposed to those different viewpoints.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of underline that one of the key things that I've learned in university is that, you know, when people say that history is subjective, the thing is that some writers are more, that is true, yes, but some writers are more subjective than other writers. And of course, we don't have an objective kind of a set of criteria to define which writer is more subjective or objective than the other, and, you know, how do we compare these things? But as Harrison said, the opinions of the historians will not really constrain you when you're going to be studying history at these places. So don't really kind of feel worried about that. And the reason why we're having these debates, you know, that, you know, people accuse historian X of having a subjective viewpoint or not having taken into consideration, you know, an important piece of evidence on this. This is why we study history, because we debate on these things. So also disagreeing with your professors and disagreeing with other students is I think a pretty key thing about the experience, really.
I think if there's one thing to be aware of, it might be the university in itself, and it's different. No university ever has like a different or like a direct political stance, but you'll be knowing that studying history at SOAS will be quite different from studying history at, I don't know, to give another example really, but certainly historians are probably, I would say, a bit more a tendency of leaning to the left, or just in general being aware of a lot of social issues, and a lot of historical schools of thought have been leftist leaning, is my impression. But of course, there should be room for diversity of opinion, and that's still the goal of history overall. I think even if you're at Cambridge, which might be a bit white, I think there's still going to be very much an awareness of different facts and where they're coming from. So I think the main issue actually is not really universities and studying history at a university level. I think it's more if you're studying history at high school level, or what would be an A level, that there would be different ways in which it's taught. But I do feel once you get to the academic level, there's going to have to be a lot of nuances and discussions about everything that we probably wouldn't have had in education beforehand.
Yeah. I think there was one question that I just seemed to have managed to dismiss about why is history unpopular, or why do people study technology over or STEM stuff over history in the US? And I think this is a quick answer. I just think it's like, I mean, in a general point, like people study it because I think there's potentially better job opportunities, or they're interested in that. It's also very much a cultural thing at different universities. As I said, like Yale has a very strong historical tradition, and Yale has a very strong history faculty. And if you're paying the amount of money you have to pay at these universities, you want to have really great tuition. So a lot of people at Yale study history, whereas they go to Stanford. Stanford's an amazing CS department, not so good at history department. They study CS. So that and again, like at Yale, it's amazing law school, quite near to New York and so on, and the geographical impact of that, or was before everyone was shipped home, is a bit relevant. So I hope that sort of touches on that quickly. And then there's a last one here. When you apply to UK unis, besides Oxford, when is the deadline for applying? Are there interview meetings at the other unis? And then I think this is a question for you.
Yes. So for the first part of the question, the UK unis besides Uxbridge, you're going to need to apply in January. I can't remember the exact UCAS deadline this year, but I think it's usually around the 8th or 13th of January, like the first week after New Year's.
I think it's 15th.
15th this year. Okay, 2 weeks after then. For interviews, you're not going to have interviews for, usually at least, for any other university but Oxbridge, unless you're heading into certain courses like I think dentistry, medicine, then they're going to have an interview, but they're more charged towards just a few courses. In general, no, you're not going to get an interview. It's all about the application, so get a great personal statement and recommendation from your teacher, really. What was the question specifically for me? Job opportunities in Denmark, and if there will be more or less available now that I've studied here abroad in the UK. Well, I'll say that my plan, thinking just what the market in Denmark looks like, and also I have this experience actually that a lot of Danish employers won't necessarily know UCL. For some reason they'll know LSE and King's, but not UCL, even though we rank pretty much the same. So that's not too great, but it's not my plan to head back to Denmark straight away. I'll stay abroad for my master's, and then I plan to work at least 1 or 2 years abroad, figuring out exactly what I want to do before I head home. So I'm planning to really already have some interesting work experience in having done my studies abroad before I head home, because then I'll have proved that I've used my degree for something interesting. Whereas if I've just studied history at UCL, and if I head straight back home afterwards, I don't know, a master in anything, I think they'll ask specifically why I went abroad and how that compares to Danish history. And I think they'll just be stuck with the stereotype almost that if you've studied history, then you can't really do anything else but study history or teach it. But if I show that I've actually done some other work, which I think might be easier to find here in Europe or could be in America, then I think they're going to think otherwise. So that's really my plan.
Right. I think that sort of captures all the questions. I don't know if there's any others, but yeah, if not, we will send out this is on. I think this will be saved on YouTube, and send out this. You can be able to download it, whatever, from the Access Academy. And yeah, I think the one thing perhaps we haven't stressed enough is certainly Project Access is a massive resource for you in applying to any of these universities, for history, for whatever else. And yeah, that's this is just a very, very, very much a taste for the sort of help you could get, very much an overview with a one-on-one mentor. So I think if there's nothing else, we will end it there, stop the recording, and yeah, wish everyone a good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for coming along.
All
right.